Hello, my name is Ruby. I am a professional tarot reader and intuitive channel, and today we are going to do a review of the Mystique of Magdalene Oracle by Cheryl Yambrach. So I probably purchased this deck in February of this year, and I've been working with it very regularly since then. So I have a very solid grasp of the energy of these cards, what these cards want to talk about, and I'm also very opinionated about this deck, because Mary Magdalene is my primary guide. I channel Mary Magdalene whenever I'm doing collective readings, and I feel such a connection and such a devotion to the energy of the Magdalene that I'm gonna be more critical and have a lot more to say about this deck than probably any other deck in my collection. And I work with this particular deck very differently than every other deck in my collection. So let's dive in and we'll see how much ground I can cover in a reasonable amount of time. So this is the box. It is published by Blue Angel, and we love Blue Angel. We love the quality of the cardstock. We love the quality of the boxes and the guidebooks. They just always knock it out of the park. It's a very simple box. Here's the guidebook, and here are the cards. So typical Blue Angel Oracle size, typical like satin Blue Angel cardstock, really nice cardstock. These are the backings, and I don't love these backings. I don't hate them. I don't love them. I actually really prefer the backings of the other Cheryl Yambrach deck I have right here. This feels kind of busy to me. But we can't have everything we want all the time, and it's fine. I love them, and I usually display this deck with the last card I drew on top anyways, so it's fine. So we're gonna start with what I don't like about this deck. So when I first got this deck, I was actually disappointed, which is interesting to me because now I love this deck and I use it all the time. But I was disappointed because, like I said, Mary Magdalene is my primary guide, and I've done so much research around her historical legacy as well as her esoteric teachings. And I feel like this particular deck is very limited to one aspect of the Magdalene lineage, and that is the time after Yeshua was no longer in physical incarnation and Mary Magdalene took his teachings to France and then to the British Isles, maybe. And you can see in the very back of this guidebook, there is a map, and it says, stars indicate Mary, star of the sea churches along the ancient trade route used by Joseph of Arimathea and later by the Templars. So this deck is very focused on Mary Magdalene in this region of the world. And this deck, I'm going to read the first, I'm going to read the first sentence of the blurb on the back. It says, practical mystics, healers, and teachers, Mary Magdalene and her daughter Sarah are archetypes for our time. So this deck is about Mary Magdalene, and it's also just as much about Mary Magdalene's daughter Sarah. So if you don't connect to that entry point into the Magdalene myth, which is the Knights Templar, Mary Magdalene and Yeshua had children together entry point, you won't really connect with these cards. Now, I don't mind that entry point into the Magdalene lineage and the Magdalene energy, but it's not the primary entry point to me. And so I just wanted more. There was more that I wanted. And if you are interested in learning more about Mary Magdalene and you purchase this guidebook, I would really encourage you to research further than what Cheryl Yambrach interpretation of this story is, which she'll have in the card meetings. So with the guidebook, you're getting a depiction of the card, a little blurb about the divinatory meaning, and then some historical interpretation. And we're using the word historical really liberally here because a lot of this is conjecture. Now, I don't think any of the information in this book is wrong or bad or harmful. It's just limited. So I might do a video in the future of like my favorite books for diving into the medicine and the wisdom teachings of Mary Magdalene. And I think that Cheryl Yambrach Rose is into like the Tau Malachi Gnostic myth, which I love. And I think she mentions it in this guidebook too. Let me just see. Bear with me. To Tau Malachi and Margaret Starbird. So this deck is much more Margaret Starbird than it is Tau Malachi. And Tau Malachi is a Gnostic mystic who has written a book. I can't remember the name of it. But if you just Google his name, he has a book about the teachings of Mary Magdalene from the Gnostic oral tradition. And those oracular teachings are so wonderful and so much how I connect with the Magdalene myth. But I don't feel that too much in these cards. I feel more of the Margaret Starbird, the woman with the alabaster jar. So this deck is very France, British Isles, and you'll see that in the imagery. Now, there's one other thing I don't love about this deck. We're just going to get all the things I don't like out of the way, and then we can talk about all the things I do like. And we'll look at the cards as I'm continuing to talk. So the other thing I don't love about this deck is that it is very whitewashed, particularly around Seren Lakali. If you look at depictions of Seren Lakali, which is this figure right here, in France, you are not going to see depictions of a white woman. In fact, Seren Lakali is depicted as the Black Madonna. And so for me, this deck only having depictions of white people, it was something I had to initially get over. And I'm not trying to virtue signal here because I know I am a white woman. But when we're talking about Yeshua and Mary Magdalene and Seren Lakali, I think we're talking about more diversity than I see depicted in these cards. So that was a little disappointing for me as well. Like, it's just such a white deck, which is very typical for New Age imagery. And, I will say, like, I think that Cheryl Yambrach Rose is like a Celtic shaman, and her other deck is all about like Celtic portals and Glastonbury and Stonehenge. And so I think that this is like Cheryl Yambrach Rose's personal medicine she's sharing. But I would have appreciated a little more diversity in the artwork and imagery myself. So I use this deck a little differently than I use most decks. And here we have an image of Isis. So we're more now in the entry point of Mary Magdalene as a priestess of Isis. And that's the entry point that I connect to the most. And so I wish there was more cards like this in the deck. But I appreciate that this is in there at all. So I use this deck as a direct line of communication with Mary Magdalene. And so this deck doesn't live on my reading table. This deck actually lives on my devotional altar. And I will pull cards whenever I'm spending devotional time there. And then I will display that card facing front that I have pulled. So this is more of a daily draw deck for me. And I don't use the guidebook at all. I draw a card and then I'll journey with the card, or I'll immediately know what's coming through. And I do not use this deck for client readings. So the only other way I use this deck, besides this lives at my altar and doesn't leave my house and It's my direct line of communication with Mary Magdalene. The only other way I use this deck is when I'm filming collective readings for social media. And that was something that came through for me to do. So that wasn't like my idea. I probably wouldn't have on my own used this deck for any type of divinatory reading. But Mary Magdalene really wanted to come through in those collective readings I was doing. And I felt she asked me to use this deck. So for now, that's the only way that I use it. And it's really interesting because, like, I'm the type of person that usually has, like, 4 decks in my bag at all times because you just never know. You have to be prepared. You never know when you're going to need to do an on-the-go reading for somebody. But this deck is not one of those, like, in my purse decks. It's really interesting how it wants to live on my altar as a sacred tool. And this deck wants to talk about soul purpose. It wants to talk about living life in the heart space, living life from intuition and trust. I love this one so much. And this deck also wants to talk about love and divine relationships and karmic connections and soulmates or mirror souls. Now this card, I think that we spilled coffee on this card or something. I need to get a second copy of this deck anyways because it's one of those I'll be using this deck until the day I die type situation. So we should probably get a second copy anyways. Now I love, 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 love all of the depictions of Yeshua and Mary Magdalene in this deck. And this deck has a very strong energetic connection to Yeshua as well. So those are my favorite cards in the deck. So I would say purchase this if you are looking to build a connection with Mary Magdalene. And I don't think it matters so much if you are like me and you don't really feel such like a strong connection to Mary Magdalene in like the British Isles. I think that Cheryl Yambrach is like British, so I think that like is really strong for her. I could be wrong. But I think even if you're like me and like you don't mind that part of Mary Magdalene's story, but it's also not like your favorite part, I still think you'll like working with this deck just like I do. So regardless of how you feel connected to Mary Magdalene, if you feel connected to Mary Magdalene, I love this card. This is a good deck for you to purchase. And I'll say, like, I have another Magdalene themed deck, and I don't feel like that energy, the energy of that deck, which I think is the Magdalene Oracle by Tony Carmen Salerno, I don't feel a connection to the Magdalene at all when I use that deck. And so, like, regardless of all of the personal judgments and critiques I have about this deck, I love this one so much, it still carries the frequency of Magdalene and the frequency of Yeshua, and for that is why I like ride or die love this deck. And so if you feel connected to either of those energies, I say purchase this. But I would not purchase this if you're looking for a divinatory deck, like if you're trying to read for other people or you're looking for a clarifier for tarot. I would probably go with Through the Eyes of the Soul, which is another deck by the same creator. I love this one so much. And it's just so lovely to own a deck that has this imagery, because this is imagery that is so sacred to me and I'm so connected to. And it's lovely to own a deck with like this artwork of Yeshua and the Magdalene. So even though I have some criticisms, and this isn't initially what I was expecting when I purchased it. I have grown to love and appreciate this deck so much. So much. Even though I wish that it included more, because there's so much to the Magdalene myth that's so slept on. And if you're interested in learning more, I think the Tau Malachi book is a great place to start. I think the Magdalene Mysteries by Seren and Azra Bertrand are a great place to start. I think Mary Magdalene Revealed by Meggan Watterson is a great place to start. So if you're looking for more information about Mary Magdalene historically, I don't think this guidebook is for you. I think all of those books I just mentioned are for you. If you are looking to connect to the energy of Mary Magdalene in a more intuitive way through card work, I think this is a great place to be. So I hope that was helpful. Please like and subscribe to the channel, help it grow, and I am wishing you well, and I will see you soon.